Hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. I got some great news today. Like, still, take a seat. You're gonna want to be in a nice stable position before you hear this one. Chris Pine, that true heavyweight of Hollywood, who's renowned for only taking the highest quality of roles, tells us that the new upcoming live-action Dungeons and Dragons movie, co-starring Hugh Grant, is going to be a combination of Game of Thrones and The Princess Bride. Yes, finally, a D&D movie that draws inspiration from absolutely nothing that D&D draws inspiration from. It's what we've always needed. Now, the Game of Thrones thing, I feel like, actually, period, his whole statement just basically sounds like he's repeating the basic pitch from whatever pitch meeting was had that originally got this movie greenlit. It's this meets this. It's a shorthand to get executives to get their pussies wet and ready to start shoveling money out to some fantastic project that's going to make them so much cash on the other end. So much cash. I don't know. There might be a sliver of hope in the Princess Bride part of that, depending on exactly what they mean. Do they just mean romantic and whimsical? Well, that's not going to jive well with the tone of Game of Thrones, which is super dark and heavy and self-serious. It could be like an indication that there's like a Fred Savage kind of angle where occasionally we get some scenes of the kids who are actually playing these characters, and then most of the movie is about the characters and their adventures. That would be reminiscent of, the original 80s cartoon of D&D, and could actually serve as a way to teach a broader mainstream audience about the game itself. Otherwise, if it's just a fantasy movie that's branded as Dungeons and Dragons and is based off stuff like Game of Thrones and Princess Bride, in terms of the whimsical romantic side of Princess Bride, that's not that. I mean, that might be a movie. People might even like it, but is it actually going to be any at all serviceable as a D&D movie? Is it actually going to do anything to teach an audience who's, new to the whole concept of Dungeons and Dragons? Is it going to do anything to convey what's actually up with a D&D game, or role-playing in general? Or is it just going to be another fantasy brand? Another fill-in-the-blank property that could be identical to The Witcher or Game of Thrones or the new Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time or pretty much anything made right now. I guess we'll have to wait and see. At least Game of Thrones, I don't think it's a good source point to base a D&D anything on, which is ironic because in many ways Game of Thrones is derived from D&D. George R. R. Martin played D&D back in the very early days, and you can see there is a whiff of both Mystara and Forgotten Realms from time to time in the Game of Thrones series. However, he also way toned down the magic and real purposefully tried to attach it to real world historical events, and got away from the random swords and sorcery kind of adventure style that D&D games are actually based upon. Now, we've seen with Conan movies, both that Jason Momoa one from a decade ago, or Conan the Destroyer, that when you try to cleave true to swords and sorcery tropes in film, they come across as incredibly cheesy. It's kind of maybe both a problem and a blessing that the entire role-playing game genre has, is it's the last entertainment genre where those classic old pulp tropes still work as storytelling devices, because they provide a simple framework for the players to both understand and operate within. But as far as film and television goes, we are so jaded after all these decades of intense crying and drama that our television and movies bring us, that those kinds of things just kind of seem like kind of dipshit kid stuff, even if it's not necessarily supposed to be that. I find there's the few little, behind the scenes photos and, shots of the set and people, doing their acting. Chris Pine, apparently is like our lead good guy, and Hugh Grant's probably going to be some wizard or politician or a wizard politician. No indication if this is set in any sort of actual mainstream Dungeons and Dragons setting. They do have a very pale, effeminate black guy in it. And they also have a white tiefling girl, of course. They got that going for it. But still strange, with like all the noise that Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast has made over the last half decade. It's strange that they decide, you know what we're going to do to anchor our big-time, super theatrical release, high quality. It's not like that old D&D movie with the Wayne guy. No, we're going to actually make like a high-budget, real Hollywood movie with real Hollywood actors. And we're going to get Chris Pine and Hugh Grant. Flagships of diversity, those two. Did it ever occur to anyone that like the studios and all these companies are just lying about all the stuff they like to posture about, and that in a way getting angry at them about it is kind of serving their purpose? Because how much of this is they're intentionally trying to agitate the pot just so they can get it bubbling, so they can get some sort of illusion of internet traction and buzz. I guess I leave that for you to decide. It's perhaps a little paranoid thinking, don't you say? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I have little faith in any like D&D media that's not actually role-playing game products. That's not Dungeons and Dragons. It does seem like it's the long-term end game, though, for a company like Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, who are far more interested in the branded imagery of the intellectual property. I mean, I still continue to contend that just by virtue of the fact that they allow something like the Open Games license to exist for D20 is a sign that when they bought Dungeons and Dragons, they weren't buying the rules in their point of view. They were buying all the little glitchy things that they could actually put a trademark on. That's why they don't care if you have kobolds and goblins and orcs in your, OSR-derived generic D&D that you're selling on Drive-Thru RPG. But God forbid you put a Mind Flayer or a Beholder in your game. Those are the things that are actually the real Dungeons and Dragons. Real Dungeons and Dragons is tieflings and Githzerai and Beholders. It has, in a way, the Dungeons and the Dragons, they can trademark that name with the ampersand in the middle of it, but you can't say that only we're allowed to depict red dragons or any of that kind of shit. So switching it over to something that's all just media based, they've been transitioning towards that. I know people out there, you like watching your live stream, Twitch stream, YouTube stream games like Critical Role, or you like making your own and you like getting those views. But do you ever stop and consider what it's actually doing to the culture of the hobby? It's creating a passive audience. Passive audiences are less invested into things, so it's much more easier for them to complain and want to make radical changes because they haven't actually had to do it. They've had no real experience of why things have the balances they have or why things are constructed in the way they have. They're just sitting there on their desk or on their couch staring at their phone, watching a bunch of paid voice actors to pretend to be elves and Goliaths. They don't really know, what's going on. To them, they're watching a television show. It's just a live improv. It's like watching a table read of a brand new script, and you're just seeing all the actors hang out and reading their lines for the first time. And that's what Hasbro wants. They want to be able to sell T-shirts and little owlbear stuffed animals and cookbooks and all manner of things that have absolutely nothing to do with selling books and miniatures. Unfortunately, because only really the dungeon masters have any real need to buy any of their products. That's always going to be their problem. That, they can look, if they were to like get a census of the population to see, the total number of people who are involved in the role-playing game hobby, including all the players, and then the amount of people who are actually running the games and buying the stuff, the people who need to buy the Dungeon Master's guides, the people who need to buy the big maps, map packs, and who need to buy all the box sets full of little assorted minis that you have to keep buying and buying because they don't give you specific sets of stuff, or you can't just order what you want unless you want to get some off-brand 3D printed trash. No, you need to have that official WizKids shit. You gotta give them that premium game. Yeah, I don't know. This is all terrible, which is why I write very underground Pulp Fiction style role-playing games. You can get my rule books real cheap right now. I'm doing an April Fool's sale up until the 1st of April of 2022. All of my core books are only $4.99. And this isn't some cheap shit like Micro Chatbook RPG gives you or something. Like that's an incredibly good value for $4.99. I normally sell them between $10 to $15. And even that is actually cutting you a pretty good deal. But my idea, especially with the core books, is that you don't want to make them too expensive. You want as many people as possible to feel like they should be able to get, the core basic rules of whatever game it is that you're putting out, because then you can rake them over the coals for the source books they want. So anyway, be sure to check out DriveThruRPG or Amazon. Check out all of my titles. I'm not going to fuck you around or lie to you or try to, turn this into some fucking intellectual brand. I'm just writing basic, simple, Pulp Fiction, B-movie type game concepts that you and your players can easily understand and have hours upon hours of fun with. And all at an affordable price. Or, for $9.99 you can get, your basic assorted D&D books, maybe get some minis, get that branded Dungeon Master screen. That way you can be just like that dude who played the werewolf in True Blood. He also likes to play role-playing games. Why, you could fantasize about getting to hang out with Vin Diesel. You can maybe even fantasize about having gay sex with Vin Diesel after you've killed elves and orcs and goblins with him. Who knows? The sky's the limit, guys. The skies are the limit. So yeah, anytime you see D&D being mentioned in a TV show or a movie casually, that wasn't just put up there by random. This is all a marketing thing. The fact that Dungeons and Dragons is now being valued as much as it's being valued, and that it's become as pop culture accepted as it is actually a rather big anomaly. And in some ways, I kind of find I don't like it. I liked my nice little underground hobby that wasn't for normies. I mean, yes, technically anyone could play a role-playing game, but only certain people are really attracted to these things. And so that kind of gives it a little bit of exclusivity. But no more. Now it's just going to be the next Marvel or the next DCEU in all likelihood. We'll see. Only time tells. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Leave comments, and as always, stay waspinated.